Ya Ahlal Kitab, O people of the book, Ta'alaw, come, ila kalimatin sawaim baynana wa baynakum, that we come to common terms as between us and you.
He said, now, how can you not believe in God? The Archbishop, ultimately, he will come to making Jesus Christ as God. Now, the Muslim says, no, God is God and man is man. I don't think that our brother has read the Quran. Somebody wars against you, you have a right to fight back, unlike turning the other cheek.
When I look at it, I think that there must be a God, because I mean, otherwise there would be so many people believing in him.
Well, I don't read my Bible because I don't think there's a lot of help in it, really. And I don't go to church unless I feel sad, in which case I do.
God's with us everywhere. When I look at the sky, look at that sky going on to infinity. Something far beyond me or any human being. Yes.
A lot of gas, I think, up there at the moment.
Apart from the gas, I think there.
It says in the Bible that he knows all the stars by name. That speaks to me of God's great power and his great glory. And when I look at the small, intricate things of nature, it speaks to me of how God has taken care of even the smallest manifestations of creation.
Good evening. Well, are we small manifestations of God's creation, as the man on the film said, or purely products of chance, who for their own comfort have invented the idea of God? To put it another way, did God create man or man create God? It's a choice everybody's got to make. This book, The Probability of God, that's just been published, makes the incredibly important assertion that modern science is beginning to reveal the existence of a creator God. Its author, Hugh Montefiore, the Bishop of Birmingham, is with us here tonight, and next to him we have Paul Davis, who's the Professor of Theoretical Physics at the University of Newcastle, and then on my left I'm joined by Professor Sir Freddie Eyre, philosopher and logician and well known to all of us, and on my far left Professor Sir Herman Bondi, Master of Churchill College, Cambridge, and renowned scientist and President of the British Humanist Association. We have with us as well a very distinguished audience, and we shall doubtless be hearing from them later on in the programme. But is a discussion on the nature and existence of God relevant today? We've already heard some of your comments, which we recorded when we took a stroll outside St. Paul's Cathedral. To our surprise, we found most people rather interested in the idea of God.
What's your God like?
Someone I can talk to when I'm feeling on my own, I suppose.
The way he's normally portrayed is as an individual, something in man's own image, and I don't believe that at all.
I think he's got a lot of value for a lot of people, especially for lonely people and old people, probably.
And for you too?
He's my sort of reserve when I'm on my own.
He's big, he's got a beard and long hair. Black long hair, yeah, black beard. I don't think he is a black person, but he's just a voice. I think it's great, and it just helps you. And then in the night, sometimes in the dark, you feel so scared. But then when you think of God, you don't feel scared anymore.
Tall with a beard, and he's just a great man.
So he looks a bit like you in some ways.
I do believe there is something that that's well, not exactly makes decisions for us, but knows more than we do.
Do you believe in a God?
No, only actually from the point of view that I do believe that there is a point beyond which people are unable to comprehend, and when that point is arrived at, then they encapsulate the whole thing in the concept of a God.
When I look around at the suffering in this world, then I don't believe there's a God. If there was a God, it wouldn't cause the suffering that there is in this world. Then again, I think of Ethiopia with the Live Aid concert, maybe there is. To get all people together to get money together for children. I think, yeah, there is. Got to be.
Well, was our universe created by a God or not? Hugh Montefiore's book says yes, and takes a fresh look at natural theology, which, as far as I understand it, is the argument that says that you can perceive the existence of God directly from the evidence of nature, and that, of course, includes scientific evidence. Hugh Montefiore, couldn't it be argued that you are, in fact, trespassing on other people's patch?
Well, yes, you could argue anything, but I don't really see why we shouldn't reflect on what the scientists have said. I think people mix up science with the philosophy of science, that is, its meaning and interpretation. I really think anyone can have a go at that. I certainly have, and will continue to do so. I don't want to prove from the natural sciences that God exists. That I don't think can be done. But I do think we can now see that there's a high probability that this world is not a random occurrence. And that seems to me to say a very great deal.
Right. Herman Bondi, what do you actually feel about that? Because do you feel in any sense it's a misuse of science?
No, I wouldn't call it a misuse. And I was very much impressed by the book for its erudition and for its honesty. But I do think that the argument of this very good book leaves me stone cold. Not because I'm short of awe, not because I'm short of wonder. I feel our universe is wonderful and something to be awestruck by. What worries me is that this book will be taken by many people to prove Christianity, or at least to make it probable, or to prove or to make probable some other religion in which there is a revelation which makes people say, I know God's will. And that, to me, is a great source of evil.
No, well, I must come back here and say that all that you can do from natural theology is show the hunger in men and women's hearts for God's personal self-disclosure, which I believe that he has given us. And although terrible things have been done in the name of religion, I will agree with you. I also think that the most wonderful things have been done, and I'm always interested if people like you only mention the terrible things.
Right. Earlier on, Paul Davis, I described you as Hugh Montefiore's scientific champion, and presumably you've got a considerable amount of sympathy with Hugh. Would you like to explain that a bit further?
Yes, perhaps I could summarize my own position before I begin.
Absolutely.
As being perhaps best described as an awestruck agnostic, which is to say that through my scientific investigations, I have become more and more impressed with the incredibly, stupendously intricate nature of the cosmos as we come to understand the universe in greater and greater detail. So it seems more and more remarkable that things have been arranged such that, in its broadest sense, the universe is self-aware. That is, that it permits the existence of intelligent observers, such as ourselves. And it seems to me that this is not something which is inevitable, that the world could have been arranged differently, and that the fact that things have been arranged so that we can exist and observe the world, and that, moreover, our existence seems to depend very delicately upon the organization of the cosmos and the nature of the laws of physics. The fact that that is so seems to me a puzzle, and a puzzle that deserves an explanation. In other words, I would like to know why the world is the way it is. I can't accept it as a brute fact. I would like some sort of explanation.
Right, Ferrier. I imagine that as far as you're concerned, we've been talking a whole lot of rubbish so far. I'd like to hear your view on the subject.
I don't think we've been talking rubbish. I think there's been a lot of bad logic. That's not quite the same thing. What the last argument comes to is saying the world is arranged as it is, therefore somebody arranged it. Now, this is a very poor argument because it could apply to however the world is arranged. I mean, all that you have said, and all that I'm afraid the Bishop has said in the book, which I also admired very much. I thought it was a very honest book and a very erudite book, I mean, to say so. Nevertheless, all he was saying was, there are these causes, there are these effects, and had the causes been different, the effects would have been different. Nobody's going to dispute this. What is totally lacking is any justification for the assumption that the world as it is was designed, and had the world been different, it would not have been designed. And in fact, saying it's all designed by God is not an explanation of anything at all. You're just saying, here I give up, but because, and in fact, President has admitted this, so science goes no further, therefore we're going to bring old Noble Daddy to make us all feel cheerful. That won't do.
The reason why I'm interested in the natural sciences here is that so often you hear people saying the natural sciences have disproved God, or there's no reasonable basis for believing in God. I'm afraid Freddie is backing a loser here. I mean, it could just be a brute fact that human beings have evolved with their amazing capacities for relationship and for their experience of God is phony. It could just be true. It could be true that our intimations of morality have no ultimate sanction, that our experience of what is true and good and beautiful isn't a window into reality. But the simplest explanation of the lot, the simplest explanation in logic, is that there is a creator.
Right. There are many other ways of looking for God other than science. And some might actually say better ways. And most of the world's religions believe that God takes steps to reveal himself and reveal the world to us. And I'd like very much to hear from Mahur Krishnamurti, who is a Hindu who is actually sitting in the audience here tonight.
The Hinduism says very clearly, as far as the creation is concerned, it's not just God created the world and just left to itself. God himself became the beings, and the Hinduism strongly believes in God who creates, protects, and ultimately he dissolves. This is the belief of God, and the Hindus worship him with form and without form. The nature is the other face of God, and the Hindu strongly tries to describe the indescribable by worshipping him by various images.
Can I go to Ahmed Deedat to talk about the role of revelation?
You see, the Muslim belief that God Almighty, he reveals his messages in word form. And in that word form, this book, the Holy Quran, was revealed through the Holy Prophet Muhammad during the 23 years of his prophetic life. And it deals with these problems more directly, instead of guessing. And God Almighty, he reasons with his creation by asking him questions. He said, now, how can you not believe in God? How can you not believe in him, seeing that you were non-existent and he brought you into being? And he will cause you to die, and he will bring you back to life again, and to him will be your return. So how can you not? In other words, the way you have been computerized, the way the Creator made you, you would naturally deflect towards God as the magnetic needle does to us.
Can I just ask you whether your God is the same God as Hugh Montefiore, the bishop?
It is the same God, except that in our concepts we differ. You see, the Archbishop, ultimately he will come to making Jesus Christ as God incarnate. Now, the Muslim says, no, God is God and man is man.
Right, can I move on now? Philip Eden, as a Buddhist, what in fact do you feel about this? Because your concept of God is quite different.
Yes, well, as far as Buddhism is concerned, there is rather a different approach. We feel that there is a fundamental reality or truth or ground of being, which of course is in everything and behind everything. I think that many of the followers of theistic religions tend to believe that God is out there somewhere in the cosmos, and that it's necessary for human beings to try and somehow establish a relationship with him. As far as the Buddhist is concerned, that reality is everywhere and in everything, so that the task of the individual is to understand that reality in himself. And that is the methods that are developed in Buddhism to help somebody to come to that realization. We feel that the problem with a creator is that inevitably one must then ask the question, who created the creator? And that, of course, is endless. You can go on and on doing that. So somewhere you have to start with the first cause, and surely the first cause is the universe itself. Man is one way in which the universe experiences itself.
But your God is obviously very different then from Hugh Montefiore's God.
There's a point that Herman Bondi raised about, the fact that many terrible things have been done in the name of religion, and I think it's perhaps important to point out that probably the reason for this is that people for a long time, I think particularly in the West, have had this concept, I'm here and the truth is over there somewhere, and there is a narrow path that leads to that truth. If you have that concept, which I sort of think of as a fan-like concept, then inevitably, if you believe that you have found the right path, all the other paths are wrong, and your task is to force everyone onto that narrow path. Surely it would be so much better if we had this concept of the truth being, as it were, at the center of a circle. We are somewhere on that circumference, and there are many different paths that lead into that truth. And the thing for us to realize, I think, is that the particular path that we choose is very much a personal thing, and it depends on many different factors. It probably depends on the person that we have met that may have explained that path to us and various experiences we've had. If only we realize, all right, this path for me is the right one at this particular time, but that does not invalidate the other paths.
But are you saying, therefore, that there's only one truth, that we only have one truth that we can actually listen to and experience?
There can only be one truth with a capital T, one reality. And I think the point is that all the great religions have been trying inadequately in their own way to point man towards that truth. But for heaven's sake, don't let's have this idea that there is only this one wretched, narrow path, and that all the others are wrong.
All right, can I move the discussion on and say that we've dealt to some extent with revelation, but other people who are believers, and Hugh Montefiore has, if you like, supporters who don't only argue from design, would say that it's much more about experience and not about either design or revelation at all.
Maybe you wouldn't.
And the experience, not Hugh Montefiore, other people would. And the experience is God showing himself to us or us feeling him. And Eric Dell, you're an evangelist in the Church of England. Would you argue with that?
I think I would a bit, yes. Because I do believe that you cannot prove God scientifically. Science can only deal with the material of this current universe. God is necessarily not of this universe. He's superior and outside of it. So consequently, you can't prove him scientifically or disprove him. But of course, you want to go much further than that. If there's a God who made me, I want to know who he is. I want to know what he's like. And of course, we Christians believe that he's actually done that, said it for us in the person of Christ. And we also believe that he's alive today and we can know him. So that's what we're here to say. And that anybody can actually say, go beyond just the evidence, whether it's for or against, and say, God, if you're really there, I want to know you because I'm prepared to know the truth, whatever it costs me.
Right, Hugh Montefiore.
I do actually think that religious experience is a very important pointer. And in my book, I say it's the convergence of, as I see it, science showing us we're not just random products, probably not just random products, and conscience and experience. I mean, why is it that between 30 and 60% of people, even in this secular country, lay claim to some form of religious experience?
Pretty apt.
And one point I'm continually making is that the postulation of God explains nothing whatsoever, because it is consistent with anything that happens. And of course, it's consistent with people having religious experience, or not having it, or consistent with people who say consciousness is implanted. I mean, equally well, you can say that sadism is implanted. I mean, whatever is, but you've got to explain in some way that it would have been otherwise if there had not been a creator. And this is what is totally missing, any kind of rational argument.
Right.
I actually wanted to bring up just something of the evidence that is within human experience of just the sheer business of significance. When I say to my wife, I love you, I mean something. I do not mean I, an accidental conglomeration of molecules from some antediluvian swamp, happen to feel a totally accidental attraction towards you, another totally accidental conglomeration, etc. I mean I love you. And if you say to me, but you're just an accident happening to another accident, something inside me says, that's not right. Now, that's not good scientific evidence,
but it's human evidence. And I don't honestly think you can ignore it. It's part of humanity. And in the end, what it means is, I mean something because there is a meaning, and there's a meaner.
I must protest against the previous speaker's grotesque misuse of the word accident. I have a wife too, and I love her very much. When I say that I love her, I don't think accident. I don't believe that she came into the world uncaused any more than that I did, or my love doesn't have a cause. As well as a cause. This levity in using these words shocks me.
But Freddie, you do think that both you and your wife are the product of an ultimately meaningless process, don't you?
If you mean that I don't think that our existence was planned by some supernatural being, yes.
No, but meaningless.
I do not accept the word meaningless. I do not think that my love for her is meaningless. I think my love for her has a very great deal of meaning. It's very intense.
Has meaning for you,
and for her.
Ultimate meaning.
I don't know what ultimate meaning means here.
I'm going to move on because, in fact, we've gone slightly off half of our subject and we haven't looked at other ways of experiencing God. Many people say that there is a different way, a much quieter way of experiencing God. Can we ask Sister Martine Hayden?
I mean, I've listened with great interest to the arguments, and I couldn't help looking back over my own life. I mean, I found myself a Catholic, born in Catholic Ireland. I thought there was nothing else in the world. And my journey has been about finding out all the different aspects of the truth. And I went through all the phases of trying to prove the existence of God, from arguments and learning about the first cause, uncaused, and it left me as cold as ice. It just didn't do anything for me as a person. And I think in these last years, it has been much more about looking for God within the design of my life, actually seeing design in my life, how somehow I am being led. I mean, even the fact that I join an order which is dedicated to searching for truth is not, to me, an accident. And I hear all the different truths, and I'm really excited about what's happening in science, because I can see that really is, there's a convergence of truth. And there's so much more humility. I'm not saying I'm humble, as they say, if you say you are, you aren't. But I'm saying that scientists, theologians, people in general are much more humble than they were, say, 20 years ago. I mean, I was locked in combat with Freddie Eyre 20 years ago or so about conscience. I wouldn't argue that way now. I don't want to. I can't match his mind. And I don't think the mind can actually say it all. I find myself going to my heart about religion. And I just discover more evil in myself and more good as I go along. And the revelation of Christ in Christianity helps me there immensely, because I find that Christ didn't talk theological argument or logical argument. He didn't use any of those. He talked about the lilies of the field. He said the kingdom of heaven is like, that's a simile. So for me, God is revealing himself in me, in everybody. You know, I felt really close to the Buddhist gentleman who was speaking over there. I really felt I can relate to that too. I can look into the heart of a rose and it speaks to me. I can also look into the Bible and it speaks to me.
Professor Eyre, are you going to say that that's not a valid experience and that that's not a valid argument?
I think it's not an argument at all. It's a very moving personal position, which I think lost to want to criticize.
Right. Well, this debate hasn't included one essential element, and that's looking at the alternative choice that belief in God is totally man-made. Hans Isaac, how do you view that?
Well, as an atheist, of course, I can't believe that God created man. I think my parents had something to do with it. I have a distinct feeling that we're taking too provincial a view of the terms God and religion. We think of it in terms of dear old Pink Church of England. But of course, that is only one very small aspect of religion. Both Torquemada and St. Francis of Assisi
were religious and had an image of God, but they were very different images of God, one from the other. The Ayatollah Khomeini and Bishop Montefiore, I'm sure, have quite different gods in mind when they think about religion. Even the Jehovah of the Old Testament is very different to the kind of God that the bishop is talking about. So I think it's very important to realize that if man creates God in his image, as I'm sure he does, he has many different needs and consequently creates many different types of God.
Can you define that a bit more closely? What are you actually saying? I mean, I can see Hugh Montefiore blenching, but can you actually simplify that a little for our audience?
Well, if your personality is warlike, wants to proselytize, is aggressive and so on, then you go for the kind of God that the Quran portrays, which wants to proselytize the world and is warlike and so on. If you are peace-loving, you want to have an assurance of a future life and so on, and happiness, then perhaps you adopt the kind of God portrayed by the
Ahmed Deedat, would you agree with that?
I don't, ma'am. You see, I don't think that our brother has read the Quran. You see, there are 99 attributes of God, and out of that, this one that you are talking about is non-existent in this book.
Can I ask you a question? Are you saying then that the Muslim God is actually a peace-loving God who wants peace in the world?
Yes, yes. And he tells us that if somebody wars against you, you have a right to fight back, unlike turning the other cheek.
What about the concept of the holy war, the jihad?
Yes, that is a struggle for righteousness. For example, Britain, when she was under attack by Hitler, what you did was jihad. And we take our hat to you, to Winston Churchill, for putting the spirit into your people. Now that is what is a defensive war. And you had to retaliate. Because if you didn't, if you just sat back, keeping Hitler at bay, it wouldn't have served the purpose. You have to attack. And in the state of nature, everyone has a right to do that. So Islam allows us to defend ourselves and to extend our hostilities to a reasonable amount of satisfaction and retaliation.
All right, can I come back to Hans Eysenck, and perhaps you'd like to develop it a little further, because we've actually heard an exchange between the two of you, but would you like to come out on a little bit further about perhaps other religions and not only about Islam?
Well, it's not so much a particular religion, because within each religion you have all sorts of different gods. As I was trying to say, that of Torquemada and that of Francis of Assisi are all Christian gods. They're entirely different. So man creates God in his own image, even within a given religion, and certainly between different religions. The God he needs will be different God according to his own personal requirements and to the kind of society in which he lives. Our society is different to that of the time of the Crusades, and consequently we need a different kind of God.
Can I ask you then about the role of conscience, and where does conscience come from?
Well, psychological experiments on conscience have shown pretty conclusively that you can manipulate it and create it through a process of social learning, Pavlovian conditioning, and so on. It is something that is acquired through social influences. Though there is also a strong genetic factor in it. In other words, altruism, the tendency to do good to others, is certainly, to some extent at least, genetically controlled, in the sense that if you look at identical and fraternal twins, there's a much higher correlation within the identical than within the fraternal groups. And the same is true of religion. I think that's a very important point, that religious beliefs are in fact genetically controlled.
Professor Eyre, where do you think conscience comes from?
I entirely agree with the last speaker.
I have no quarrel with that at all. Anybody in the general audience? Yes, in the front row.
I'd like to throw out a definition that might be helpful to some people of the difference between religion and Christianity, because there's a distinct difference. Religion is largely man, by his own efforts, some of which have been demonstrated tonight, in terms of mental gymnastics, trying to get to God and looking at the most powerful thing, like the sun, and bowing to that. Christianity is God coming for man. And I was interested in Herman Bondi's remark that he's an anti-revelationist. If there's a God at all, there's no way we can know anything about him by guesswork, only that he should reveal himself to us, which he did in the person of Jesus Christ and became human.
But where does conscience come from?
Conscience is given to us by God, and we are in the process of numbing it and pushing it down to suit their own purposes and interests, which is called selfishness.
Other people in the audience, where does the conscience, where's the idea of conscience come from? Yes.
I would say the conscience comes from the human soul. It's the human soul speaking out and crying out for release.
Okay, it's not just fear. Do you not think that it's an animal fear, a fear of being found out? Yes, Daniel Rubinstein.
I think it's a sort of fear of alienation, really, being cut off from the rest of the community. And I think perhaps that, for instance, that Live Aid event demonstrated a huge sense of community.
Everybody wanting to join
yes,
in. Herman Bondi, would you share that?
Well, I certainly feel that we are basically herd animals, and that all herd animals must have feelings like conscience.
What do you feel?
Well, I don't think conscience is to be equated with either wish fulfillment or going with the herd, because my conscience often forces me to stand out from the herd. I think it is the God-given means by which I have to act responsibly. And I think that is how it's evolved is something for I don't understand it in animals. I look to the scientist, I look to the psychiatrist to see how it functions with the ego and the superego. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what it actually is. I think it's the God-given faculty by which we can behave responsibly. And it's not to be equated with things like utility or welfare or wish fulfillment or anything like that.
I must protest against this assumption certain passages are God-given as opposed to others. I disagreed, for example, with the physician when he talked about love. Indeed, I mean, love is a human emotion, but there's no particular reason to single that out as pointing to the existence of a supernatural being any more than the other human emotion. I mean, all human emotions are to be accounted for in the same sort of terms, in the kind of terms Professor Ising or one of his colleagues would account for them. And just to single out love is quite arbitrary. I mean, the assumption is that we are naturally egotistic, predatory, and so on, and that only because of some supernatural agency do we behave decently to one another. This is absolutely contrary to the facts. We have, in fact, as even David Hume pointed out, principle of sympathy, innate principle of sympathy, as well as an innate principle of egoism. And one no more needs a divine explanation than the other.
William Hackney.
Look, let's get this straight. There is no reason on earth why we shouldn't go around acting like perfect pigs to all the country. There is no big Monty Python foot poised to come and squash us if we act badly. Yet, a lot of us do act well towards our fellow man.
But why should we not? That was just the point that I was making. Because I was just protesting against your assumption that it's somehow natural for us to want to be decent to one another and unnatural to be decent to one another. What possible ground have you for that assumption?
In this world today, my experience is that it strikes me that more people are being unreasonable to each other than are being reasonable.
Well, in that case, you should be Manichaean and believe in the devil. If you're taking your deity as accounting for human attitudes, that's the way you should go. Totally illogical.
Professor Eyre, all other species are selfish, basically, aren't they?
No. By no means. By no means. Go ahead.
Herman Bondi.
But I wasn't saying that our being herd animals means that everybody has to move with a herd. What I do mean to say that we are not solitary beings. We've got to have the faculty, as other animals live together, to get on in some fashion with each other.
Tina Mehta.
You just mentioned the devil with great aplomb, but the devil's best trick is to make man believe he does not exist. And I think that's what the problem is, that, we are in a state of chaos suddenly instead of harmony. And it is the state of harmony that we are trying to create in this world, and not distort the minds of children by showing them violence and explaining that violence is necessary to bring about harmony.
Krishnamurti.
Agree. Hinduism clearly says, what is God? Answer to our dear friend's question. God is truth, God is love, and God is good. Whatever name you call, it is God. Why allergy to the name God? Love, beauty is God.
So you don't actually feel that he's supernatural, that God is supernatural. Hugh Montefiore, what do you feel about that?
Well, I do think that God discloses himself in the smallest particle of matter, and in our human relationships, and in love. Is to me a window into God. But I do think that he has supernaturally disclosed himself to us. That's why I'm a Christian, because I believe that he has been incarnate. As you said, that's what Christians believed. I believe God was incarnate and suffered the worst that people could do to him. And this is, to me, the only way I can see my way through the problem of evil.
Can I just remind people, and perhaps you meant to refer in particular, of Einstein's concept of God, which was, yes, God who made the universe in wonderful ways, but had not the slightest interest in us human beings, and was a totally impersonal thing that couldn't possibly care for our prayers.
I want to talk to a psychologist next, Leslie Francis.
I would like to go back to the question you keep asking. Did God create man, or did man create God? And I see that as a deceptively simple kind of language used. They're two completely different order questions. It is for the theologian in me to come to the question, did God create man? But the psychologist in me would want to answer your question in a different way. Did man create the image of God? He cannot go beyond looking at image. And I suspect what we've heard in the discussion tonight is a whole lot about the variability in the image that is used, but we haven't been able to get on to the ontology beyond that image.
I'm sorry, everybody, but we've run out of time. The choice that is open to us is whether God made man or man made God. It's now over to you. All that remains for me to do is to thank the audience for their contributions and, of course, the panel. I'm sorry we didn't have time to say any more, and from me, good night.